Welcome back to Saturday Agenda, our political panel now, and joining me from Perth is Senator Matthias Cormann, the Assistant Shadow Treasurer. Thanks for joining us, Matthias.
Good to be here.
And with me in the studio, Senator Matt Thistlethwaite from the Labor Party. Thanks for joining us, Matt.
Morning, Chris.
Firstly, Professor Barry Brook, a climate change scientist, a man who's very, very serious about tackling the effects of climate change, but also very much a promoter of nuclear energy. Will the Labor Party ever have a serious debate about domestic nuclear power?
Well, we've had a debate over the course of the last couple of months in the Labor Party about nuclear issues and nuclear energy. There was the white paper draft that was released this week by the relevant minister. I think we're mature enough to have a sensible debate about all energy options, and it's certainly something that we're going to need to do as an economy, as a nation moving forward, as we come up with alternatives to tackle the issue of climate change. So the issue that obviously exists and still needs to be dealt with, but is of course, where do you put power stations and how do you deal with the waste? And I'm not sure that the world has dealt with those issues adequately yet, and that's why you've got some resistance not only within the Labor Party but also in the wider community.
Yeah, I think a lot of people talk about that, who would want a nuclear power station in their backyard. But
that's right. Well, John Howard learnt that when he was in government.
Not many people want a coal power station in their backyard either. Matthias Cormann, the other thing that Professor Brook had to say was he's very pessimistic about the carbon tax. He doesn't seem to think it's going to do a great deal for the environment.
Well, I mean, we've said all along that the carbon tax is all economic pain for no environmental gain. I mean, it's very obvious now, even more so since Durban, that Australia is out there on a limb on its own. I mean, the carbon price in Europe, the only sort of reasonably comprehensive scheme, is down to $8 a tonne now. When Julia Gillard wants to impose a $23 a tonne carbon price as of 1 July 2012, it's very clear that the carbon tax in Australia will make Australian businesses less competitive internationally, and it will just shift emissions overseas.
Yet, Matthias Cormann, you're prepared to spend billions of dollars to try and get down to the same 5% reduction target. I mean, that's the problem here, isn't it? That you're going to waste a lot of money on that scheme as well.
Well, that's not quite right. We will be investing money into actually achieving net reductions in emissions for the world. Like the problem with Labor's scheme is, because it will make Australian businesses less competitive internationally, because it will make higher emitting businesses in other parts of the world more competitive than even the most environmentally efficient business in Australia, it will just shift emissions and jobs overseas. Whereas our direct action plan will actually achieve reductions in emissions in Australia in a way that actually delivers a net reduction in emissions for the world. It won't just shift emissions to other parts of the world. So our direct action policy will actually deliver a better bang for our buck.
Well, I just want to go now to wrapping up the political year that we've seen, the one that Julia Gillard herself declared would be the year of decision and delivery. And we can see in the headlines today in the Fairfax papers a year-end interview with the Prime Minister, and it's saying basically the Prime Minister's just digging in to hang in. She's on the defensive. Right at the end of the year, she's still trying to defend her position from leadership speculation. Matt Thistlethwaite, that is a terrible way for the Prime Minister to end the year, isn't it? And especially when she seems to have brought a lot of this upon herself with her ham-fisted cabinet reshuffle at the start of this week.
I think the defining characteristic of the Prime Minister this year is resilience. When you look back over the course of the last year, we've achieved quite a lot in government, and you put that in the context of being in minority government. A lot of commentators, coalition representatives saying that this government wouldn't last 6 months, that we'd be back at the polls within a year. Well, we're still here. The Prime Minister's still doing a fine job. A lot of reform going through.
It's not a great claim, isn't it? At the end of this year,
not
the
so
best you can say about Julia Gillard is she's still there.
But we've been a reforming government. You've mentioned that the highlight of the year is no doubt the carbon pricing legislation. Despite all the uncertainty in Europe,
broken promise,
despite the biggest scare campaign in the history of this country, we got that legislation through after 37 parliamentary inquiries recommended that we need to do this as an economy. And we're not resting on our laurels. There's a national disability insurance scheme. There's further tax reform with the minerals resource rent tax, which will boost superannuation and retirement incomes in this country. We're getting on with the job. We've been a good government. We're delivering for the Australian people, and the Prime Minister will continue to do that into the future.
If we go to the reshuffle, though, is the mistake that the Prime Minister made with the reshuffle that she tried to settle old scores? She got rid of people who she thought were Kevin Rudd supporters and promoted her own supporters?
I think the reshuffle really reflects the future challenges that our economy and our nation is going to face. One of the biggest issues for Australia as a nation is the ageing of the population. What that's going to see is massive increases in the rates of dementia, in the rates of Alzheimer's and other mental illness. That's why Mark Butler's been promoted to a cabinet level position.
Well, it's interesting you should mention that. Mark Butler has been promoted to cabinet. Mark Butler is the Minister for Social Inclusion and Mental Health. He's gone into cabinet, but no one has gone out of cabinet to make up for him going into cabinet. The size of the cabinet has expanded. So I just want to go to a grab now, a comment from Julia Gillard explaining why her cabinet has been expanded from 20 to 22.
I have selected people who have got the skills to deliver the changes we need, but I've also selected people who can publicly make that case for change.
Well, Matthias Cormann, does that stand the pub test? Is that plausible that the Prime Minister's expanded cabinet because of her agenda, or is it because she was in too weak a position to actually sack people?
Well, I mean, Chris, the truth of the matter is the Prime Minister's too weak to sack anyone who is not in the Senate. Because, of course, she's frightened that anyone that she sacks might cause a by-election. I mean, the reshuffle has done nothing to restore confidence in the government. The same bad policies are still there. The same bad performers are still there. There's so much division, so much dysfunction now that the blood is gushing freely into the streets. I mean, this is a government that is completely focused on themselves. The Prime Minister started off with breaking her most emphatic pre-election promise not to introduce a carbon tax. And at the end of the year, I mean, the government is just a completely dysfunctional soap opera. When we've got serious storm clouds on the horizon and the government should be governing, they're completely focused on themselves.
Senator Cormann, the Prime Minister has delivered on 2 of her 3 key objectives, though, hasn't she? She wanted to get that carbon tax legislation through. She wanted to get the mining tax through. She's delivered on those 2. It's asylum seekers and the border protection issue that is outstanding.
Well, you're right. She's pushed a carbon tax through the Parliament, which is the worst carbon tax anywhere in the world, based on false promises, based on, of course, like a breach of the most emphatic pre-election commitment. The mining tax is not actually through the Parliament yet. It still has got a way to go in the Senate.
She has struck a deal, though, hasn't she, on the mining tax? And that will see more money come into federal coffers from the boom, from the extraordinary profits that mining companies are reaping out of this boom.
You must have better information than me, because the last that I've heard from the Greens is the Greens still are asking some very serious questions, and the Greens have reserved their position in the Senate in relation to the mining tax, so we'll see what happens there. But the other point, of course, is that all throughout the year we've had a Prime Minister who has failed to protect our borders. I mean, that was one of the issues that she said she would fix when she knifed Kevin Rudd in June 2010, and ever since she has failed to protect our borders. The problem has got worse, not better.
I see that the latest boat to be intercepted is not being taken to Christmas Island. It is actually being taken now to Darwin because Christmas Island is full. There must be concern, in particular in Western Australia, in your home state, about the situation.
Well, I mean, there is serious concern in Western Australia, but as I travel around the country, there is serious concern all around the country about the fact that we have a government that is incapable of protecting our borders, that we have a government that took a solution which was put together by the Howard government and created an absolute mess at our borders. And of course it is something that Julia Gillard promised she would fix, and she has failed to do so. She's too busy having to protect herself from Kevin Rudd to actually be able to protect our borders.
If I could just let you finish off there, Matt. I mean, we are finishing off the year with all this speculation. Just how can the Prime Minister regroup and come out on a positive note next year?
Can I just respond to what Senator Cormann said? I mean, there is a solution to the issue of asylum seekers, and we've put that in the public domain, and that's offshore processing.
Who dismantled offshore processing?
The Liberal Party will not agree to it. The Liberal Party will not agree to it.
Who dismantled offshore processing?
Matthias Cormann, you've had a good go.
We have a solution there, but the Liberal Party will not agree with it. They really aren't a Liberal Party at all. They're a Conservative Party. They're going against all of their Liberal philosophies. We've seen it again this week on the issue of same-sex marriage within the Liberal caucus.
That's
Tony Abbott is not going to allow a conscience vote on the issue. Now, that's not a Liberal Party at all.
I'm going to have to wrap it up. Thanks very much for joining us this year and today,
pleasure,
Senator Matt Thistlethwaite, and also to Senator Matthias Cormann in Perth. So that's all we have for the show today. Of course, gay marriage is an issue we can take up again next year. Thanks for your company during the year, and thanks to all of our guests. I'll be back in late January. In the meantime, remember that in politics, nothing is ever as good or as bad as it seems. Bye for now.